Have you ever given a client advice that went along the lines of just take deep breaths? Maybe you're in your hypnosis sessions, and maybe it's someone you know who's getting agitated and you're telling them to take deep breaths, or even yourself when you're in a highly emotional state. Have you just told yourself that I'm just going to take deep breaths when I'm dysregulated? Here's why this can potentially do more harm than good. And I know you're probably thinking, what the hell are you talking about, Fritz? Well, I'm going to explain to you one very, very particular nervous system response where something like deep breathing can actually make things worse. And this nervous system state is freeze. So when our nervous system is detecting threat and it wants us to go into a freeze response, it automatically goes there because that is a default pattern that it's learned. Then what happens is that the survival brain, our autonomic nervous system, detects that ding, 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 you are in danger, freeze, right? And so that message goes from the brain into the body. And that message goes down into the intercostal muscles between our lungs that is involved with expanding our lungs, as well as the diaphragm. And so in that moment in time, the brain is sending messages to our lungs to say, breathe shallow. And this makes sense in an evolutionary perspective because if, say, we are in freeze because we need to hide from a predator and we don't want to make noise, right? Or we want to play dead, right? And we want to freeze. If we take too deep of a breath, right? If our breaths are obvious, then that predator could potentially harm us or kill us. But if we, say, collapse or play dead or even freeze, then if our breathing is just shallow, just enough to get enough air in, then that protects us from harm. So from that perspective, it makes a lot of sense, right? But obviously we are here in the modern world, but we still have this response wired into us. And not many people know that they're actually in a freeze response, but in their bodies, they feel that they absolutely cannot move, even though their brain is super wired. That is one of the symptoms of freeze. So if that is happening to someone, maybe they were confronted by someone and they just didn't know what to say and they took a they had a freeze response, and then they forced themselves to take a deep breath, that can potentially mess things up more and dysregulate that person more. Why? Because the brain is telling the body to have very shallow breaths, right? And then they try to expand their lungs way too hard to try to regulate themselves. But that communication between brain and body is now discombobulated, and there's miscommunication because one part is saying this while the other part is like, no, we're in threat, but the other part is like, no, let's do this instead. So that miscommunication and that conflict can potentially make the dysregulation in the body worse. And if, like, just imagine like there's something that is keeping the lungs from expanding, right? The freeze response is like, do not move. And we're trying to do this. This causes a lot of tension and a lot of air hunger too. Like it makes you feel more air hungry because you want to take a deep breath, but like your lungs aren't expanding because the nervous system is like, no, we are in threat. We cannot do this. And so that's why we want to be really, really mindful about breath work exercises. That's why in the Bulletproof program, we specify specificity because we first want to work with ourselves first. If we know or have that we have symptoms of freeze, then we do not want to take deep breaths because it will make things harder. It will not cause relief. And if you're just hearing this for the first time, I know this is mind-blowing as well, because this is what we traditionally learn, right? We were taught to be like, you need to do the breath work and then you will regulate your nervous system. But if we have dysregulation, we're stuck in a freeze response, we're actually very dysregulated, and our breathing mechanics will not support deep breaths. So it's not breath work regulation, it's more like regulation equals full expanded breath. And so instead, what you want to do, instead of forcing yourself to breathe when you're finding that you're in a freeze state response, if you want more detail on the freeze response, I have more videos here to explain exactly what that is and what it feels like in your body. So comment below freeze and I'll send you those trainings. But if you are in a freeze response, all you want to do is like shining a spotlight. So right now I have this light. Imagine that you're just shining a spotlight in that part of your body. And all you're doing is observing what's happening in your lungs. That is it. You're just going to observe, or allow your clients to just observe that area if you're working with clients. So whenever you feel yourself, your breath is very shallow and you're in that freeze response, it doesn't feel like you can take a deep breath. Instead of manipulate your breath to be deep, all you're going to do is shine that spotlight in your lungs and observe what happens. Observe what happens to your breath. And you're not going to make judgments on it. Really avoid to put meaning on it. If you're finding that you're observing for a good minute and it's still very shallow, stop saying, oh my God, why is it shallow? I want to take deep breaths now. Why am I so dysregulated? Why is my breath too damn fast and shallow? I don't want this. I'm supposed to have deep breaths. I'm supposed to only have 5 breaths per minute. Stop that shit. And again, just shine a spotlight onto your lungs and then observe what happens. Eventually, because you're present with the sensations within your lungs, aka interoception, you're present with the internal sensations there, that in and of itself can really start to regulate your nervous system. And eventually, just shining that spotlight, observing without judgment, without meaning, is going to make a massive impact with your breathing mechanics. Remember, you already know how to breathe properly. Your body knows what the best mechanism is for breathing. If it's stuck in a nervous system state such as freeze in any of the survival states, then it purposefully made your breathing shallow and restrictive. So by paying attention on it, what you're doing is you're starting to work with your body instead of against it. And this is the most powerful thing. By doing this, just notice, try it out. Just try it out even right now. If you're not in freeze, if you're finding that your breaths are shallow, after this video, pause, close your eyes or look down softly. Just observe what happens to your lungs. Observe what is happening in your breath. Don't try to manipulate your breathing. Do not try to make a story or narrative out of your breathing. Just be quiet, listen, and observe and see what happens. You might find that things start shifting rapidly. You might find that your system just feels more regulated and you're more in control of it. So definitely try this out, try it for yourself, and then see what happens once you try it with your clients. Once you do, definitely let me know and comment. I would love to hear from you. I hope that this was super duper helpful. And if you have any questions or want trainings on different things with regards to nervous system regulation and helping clients to have results faster and helping you with your personal development and healing faster, then definitely comment below and let me know. I would love to do that for you. Otherwise, thank you. Let's have a massive impact together, one question, conversation, and observation at a time.